But there are some land management practices that I think this group are really interested in. And what we've seen time and time again is that these adoption of these practices we can check through the microscope and say, yeah, that's maintaining the soil food web or improving it, right? And I think sometimes what's missed is people think, I'll put out compost and keep doing the same thing I've always done, keep tilling or using herbicides or something, and it just keeps disrupting the soil food web.
Yeah, you're not allowing things to reach a stable situation where they're perfectly capable of monitoring themselves and keeping things in balance. It's when you're walking through your agricultural fields and you notice that there's a problem starting to develop on this plant over here. I would take samples from around that plant, just that one single plant, to figure out if it's something's not right in the soil food web. And you look through there and you discover that, you have lost all of your bacteria and all of your fungi. And the next time you go out, more of the field is being starting to show those same symptoms. And you look at the pathway of that area of your agricultural field that's not doing well.
Right.
And you notice that it points right to your neighbor's barn. You might suspect that your neighbor was doing something with some very toxic chemicals that blew over onto your property.
Right.
And you'd really like to educate your neighbors about how much harm they are bringing about and see if you can't convince them to come over and see what you're doing.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of what you're doing, the first practice of biological soil management or regenerative agriculture that I wanted to bring up is really the individual, the farmer, the land manager, the person that's training someone else has to develop their own way of seeing the world differently, right? And I think in this group, we'll have a lot of people that are reaching for this new mindset for regenerative agriculture. So, what do you think about that? Do you agree with me that that's kind of the starting place?
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to think about what have we been doing in the past and the fact that it's not working very well anymore. You are going out and you're applying these chemicals and it's taking gasoline, it's taking time, salary for somebody to be in the cab, going back and forth, back and forth. And, examples that we have from the United States for on these kinds of things is with the chemical system, it's $160 per acre to put all of these toxic materials and having to apply them and everything. It's not easy, it's not simple, and you don't do it just once a month.
Right.
You're going to be in there several times or constantly. It's not years and years. When we first started doing this work, we used to say, well, you've had 75 years to destroy the biology in the soil. Could you at least give us 7 years to put it back and get it functioning right? We've worked enough on this since that time to know that we will start improving things for your plants on the very first application that goes into your system.
It's kind of like taking a sick human that has problems with their gut and restoring the things that are missing in their gut microbiome. It can shift drastically their health very rapidly. Well, practice two it kind of goes along with this mindset thing, but it's working with natural processes, really understanding the soil food web dynamics, the kinds of things that we have that we've been talking about with this group. And then I think that they're already going to recognize, because they work with farmers across many different countries, that each area has some of its own kind of indigenous solutions to the food systems. People have passed down the wisdom of these things. And I think, to me, I think about the colonial era and the cut down your trees and grow corn, and how much food system wisdom was lost in that process that could be brought back. You sure grow cotton, but maybe grow it along with some local varieties of plants.
Yeah, something that fixes nitrogen would be a
Mm-hmm.
really good idea. Something that forms really good mycorrhizal fungi,
Mm-hmm.
making certain that all of your cotton plants are linked into every other one of the cotton plants,
Mm-hmm.
so that everything is doing well instead of maybe just one or two doing well and everybody else is kind of sick and unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a great way to get uniform um, amounts of nutrients into the plants, and then they tend to all mature at the same time
Mm-hmm.
if you've got everybody hooked up below ground.
Plus, maybe all the bugs will go bother your neighbor. Leave your plants alone.
They absolutely will. And it just tears you apart, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, that means maintaining biological integrity is a huge part of the natural process. So, we've already mentioned tillage before. I think a lot of people are aware of that. Keeping soil covered, avoiding those toxic inputs that cause, disruption to the soil food web. To me, it's not just one practice, it's a whole group of practices. It's saying my farm is not just going to be constantly harmed all year long by what I do on it.
Yep. And you stop spending so much of your time out running the tractors across the field, out in trying to improve the health of the plants in ways that don't actually improve the health of the plant. So we'd really like to see, and we have a fair number of pictures where we've had just the onion plants plus biology and increasing um, the plants that cover all of those surfaces that the row of onions is not in. And the increase in yield and size of those onions or tomatoes or different kinds of fruit trees.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing that it just doesn't take that long
Mm-hmm.
to get these systems back to a condition of health. Mother Nature is out there trying to help us. We just have to pay attention to what she's trying to say.
Pay attention and maybe not start by killing our essential biological workforce in the soil. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like shooting yourself in your foot. You're preventing the good things in life from happening to you. So think about what you're going to do and maybe talk with consultants or people associated with the soil food web if you have a few problems.
Mm-hmm. So another practice or general principle that's going to maintain a thriving soil food web is you have to have some biodiversity in your system. I mean, that's where we talked about the potential of bringing in maybe a legume into that system, or I know a lot of people in the audience today might be interested in even incorporating animals into some of their management practices. And this is a no-brainer for me because I kind of cut my teeth in grassland research, and in grasslands we can have 16 different plants in a square meter, and those communities aren't having these cycles of diseases and pests and things the way that our monoculture systems really suffer from.
That diversity and the depth of soil that your roots can grow down is by having these cover plants out there, constantly putting foods into the soil, constantly helping the microorganisms build structure, build um, air passageways and hallways and aggregates around which everybody comes home in the afternoon and has a cup of tea inside the aggregate, always building and improving the lifestyle of these organisms in the soil.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it also like I can hear there's this part of my brain since I was trained at a university that goes like, but what about this? What about that? And I bet some people in our audience are that way. And so we were trained to think, wouldn't ground covers compete with our crop and reduce yields and use up water and all that? But when you get the whole system turned and you get that thriving soil food web in there, this system here, these plants, yeah, they're competing with each other, but they're also sharing resources. There's more water infiltrating because the soils are healthier. So water is less scarce anyway. Um, there's all kinds of new relationships that happen when you bring in that diversity. So that's the new mindset. It's the new way that we have to think. So, what about minimizing external inputs? There really are very few external inputs I've ever heard you say are necessary or even rarely necessary.
Yeah, because typically when we're looking at mineral nutrients, they're already there in
Mhm.
the sand, in the silt, in the clays, and all the little rocks and gravels and bits and pieces of stones of different kinds. And it's not just one kind of nutrient spread. There's several, depending on differences in the rocks that were left behind or that formed because of volcanic outbreaks. And that means that there's a huge diversity of nutrients that your plant can get hold of because you have the bacteria and fungi that can make the enzymes to pull those nutrients out of the sand, silt, clays, rocks, and pebbles and pull them inside their bodies. Now we've got more nutrients inside the bacteria and fungi, really high level concentrations inside their bodies. And so then here comes the predators. They eat the bacteria and fungi, releasing those nutrients because the concentration of nutrients in bacteria and fungi is so much greater than what the predators require. These bacteria and fungi are going, oh, we better escape now. The roller coaster ride is just about over. So they go up the sides of the um, uh, surface of the root until they reach a root hair, and there is a way for them to escape out that connection between the root hair and the wall of the root. So they all escape out there, pop, 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 out they all come. They move on down the surface of the root, collecting nutrients, pulling it back in, all the excess that the plant didn't use of any nutrient that's been released, pulling together, and they get to the end of the root tip, hang out, play around for a while, and then the plant invites all of those microorganisms back into the system, and round they go.
Mhm. So they don't need those expensive external inputs because biologically we can share nutrients.
Yep, they're already getting what they need. Why do they need to pay any attention to those human beings that do such foolish things?
Well, practice 6 is it's really this is another mindset one, but I think our audience is going to really understand this as they work with many of them work with farmers directly. Is helping the person in charge of the land take on that responsibility of saying, I'm the investigator here. It's sort of like when we talked about the recipes of compost. Some people are like, no, just tell me what the recipe is. And it's like, we'll give you a starting place. We'll tell you some of the principles. You've got to experiment. You've got to become the investigator and share with your community. Maybe your neighbor we'll say, oh, okay, so you found that because the humidity is higher here, we have to change something about the way we do this composting thing. All right, bring that all together. And this is the trick. This is how we really change the world, is empowering people to think.
Yep, and you do have to have the power to rethink and look at a situation and say, well, let's try this, but
Mhm.
try it small scale.
What you've just said is huge, because I've seen plenty of farmers that are like, I'm going to apply this regenerative ag principle across thousands of hectares. And then they go, see, it didn't work. And it's like, okay, I wish you had started with a quarter of a hectare and really focused on figuring out how to make that thing work there. Prove it to yourself. Prove it to yourself that it works before you try to apply it on a huge scale.
Yep, and
Yeah.
remember that the weather is different every year.
Yeah.
When have you ever had exactly the same weather this year as last year, or the year before, or the year before that, or the year before, or the year before? It
Mhm.
just doesn't work that way. Therefore, you need the diversity of all kinds of different organisms in that compost. And many times in 2 or 3 years, the community of microorganisms is completely changed
Mhm.
compared to what you had 3 or 4 or 5 years previous. So keep up with those changes. And how do you get those um, those different kinds of species? How do you find all of that diversity that you need? You go out and you collect small amounts of all kinds of materials
Mhm.
and you mix them together and find out if that's a good mix for your plants. Is it helping or is it hindering?
Mhm. No, and then it all comes back to this too. Just monitor, monitor, monitor. Get the microscope out. Evaluate every practice that you're trying on a small scale. See how that influences, like you said, plant production, but also what's going on in the soil food web. What's happening to our bioindicators, until we fine tune what we should do before we go massive scale.
Right. Yeah, it's heart-rending to see people just assume that they only have to do what was written in the book. Well, what's written in our book over here says trial everything,
Yeah.
do small scale assessments. So you make sure that it's worth it for you to go out to your 10,000 hectares.
Hmm. Absolutely. Okay, so at this point, I'm sure the group will be very appreciative of your time and energy, that we could bring these videos to them, this conversation here, and then I'm there in person to answer some questions. And if I can't answer the questions, I will bring them back and ask you.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Thanks very much, Elaine.
Yes.